Welcome to the Good Talk Podcast, where we remind you of the joy of life, the love of God, and the possibilities that lie ahead. Pete and Jordyn here with episode 94.
When to quit or commit.
Very good.
Nice rhyme.
Do you like the rhyme?
I like the rhyme, as always. And I like the very clear title. We know what
It's
we're going to get.
very clear. We're going to talk about when do you quit and when do you commit. And I'll say this. We'll do a little intro here in a second. But if you're listening to this in a car, I would say it's hard to take notes in the car. I was going to say this. I'm gonna give you a lot of questions for you to ask yourself, and you're going to want to write these questions down.
Okay.
So if you're listening in the car, listen, but then I'd encourage you to go back and write down these questions. They're very specific, and it's going to really help you get under the surface of should you quit or should you commit.
Okay. How was your Father's Day?
It was awesome. Thank you, Jordyn. Because I know you spearheaded a great deal of it.
Okay.
But oh my goodness, it was a great day.
What did we do? We woke up.
We just kind of hung around the house.
We did something in the morning.
I opened a card.
Oh, yeah. Pepper gave you her presents because
Yeah.
Pepper wakes up before the boys.
Yes.
And so she gave her, I got you from her this little, those like little customizable books that puts the baby's name in the book. So it was like, I think the title's like Pepper, You'll Always Be My Little Girl or something. And it's just all about like a dad and daughter relationship.
great. I
It was
loved
super
it.
sweet.
It was awesome.
I saw an Instagram ad for it, and so I bought it. And all the Instagram ads showed like the dads like sobbing, crying, reading through it. And Pete's like, "Oh, cool, thank you."
I wasn't sobbing.
I know. I think if you read the book, though, you really haven't read it. It's very sweet.
You're right. It's long. I need to dive into it.
Yeah,
They
it's
were
super
also ads, probably being a little over dramatic, but
True.
it was super sweet. And then the afternoon, we went out to the farm. Two of my boys had to work part of the day, but we went out there. It was still a blast.
Yep, played in the creek, and then
Hit a bunch of golf balls. Brewer and I did.
Yeah. His boys are really into golf right now. So for your Father's Day gift from them, they gave him this game called Bucket Golf.
Yes.
And if you have like a friend, spouse, a son, daughter who likes golf, this is a really cool like yard game for golf.
It is.
I
kind
can't
of
really
play it with a
explain
wiffle ball, a golf club, and then you have these buckets that act as the holes, and you can put them wherever you want. Kind of create your own
Make your own
challenges.
little course. Yeah, it's super cute.
I mean, the boys played that all afternoon. That was fun.
Yeah.
It's great. We came
And
back.
then we went to the pool.
Went to the pool, grilled some steak. It was a perfect day.
Good. I'm glad. There's a fly flying around. We literally, it's been beautiful this week. Like it's been kind of in the 70s, which is really rare here in Tennessee for this time of the year. But we had our doors open and there's a fly that I am about to axe murder. So yeah, I'm glad you had a good Father's Day.
Yeah, it was great. So I hope all the dads out there had a great day.
Yeah. Special.
We did also took my dad to breakfast, which was fun.
Yeah, we did that. Pepper was a
Saturday.
holy terror.
She was.
Pepper is just like entering into her two-ness. And by two-ness, I mean like she's about to be two. And just like out of nowhere will just be so difficult, especially in public because she knows like she can get away with so much more. And poor your dad, like I feel so bad. I was chasing her around the restaurant the whole time. Like she just was not having it that day, but we did get to see him. I'm glad
She has a very strong will
Yeah, she does.
and does not like being told what to do.
No. Yeah. Does not want to be told no. Does not want to be redirected right now. Excuse me. He's pointing to me for those of you who are listening. I think I definitely have some of that in me, but
For sure.
I'm not on a toddler
sure.
level. Oh my gosh. She gets a nice little dose from each of us, I think, in that department. But anyways, pray for us because we, day in and day out, some days are really good. Other days I'm just like, wait, this doesn't end till she's like 4. Because everyone's like, oh, just wait till she's 3. It gets worse. And I'm like, dang it.
See, that's the beauty, though, is that every kid's quite different. So some kids, I think, do go through it at 2 or before. Some kids don't go through it till they're 3. Nobody's going to completely escape this, I don't think. I think it's just part of a kid figuring out stuff.
I always have to say to myself and to you, like, her brain's not developed. Like, she cannot reason. She cannot, like, actually comprehend the things she's feeling. So I try to have grace.
I feel like that's the excuse I want to use with you when I, tick you off doing something. I'm sorry, sweetie. My brain is just not fully developed.
I'd be like, you're probably right. You were probably right. Anyways, let's talk about when to quit versus when to commit.
Okay. I like this topic a lot because I think that for the most part, when you listen to podcasts, when you go to a conference, seminar, anything that's kind of personal growth related, it's usually centered around what goals do you need to set, which makes sense. As a life coach, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is help people achieve their greatest things. And so almost everybody thinks about it from the standpoint of what I need to add to get to where it is I want to go. The reality is that often it's not something you need to add, it's something you need to delete so that you can be better at and have more time for the things that are actually going to advance you towards living the life that you want to live. This whole concept actually came from an email that a client sent me. So we had gone through an exercise the month before trying to help this client decide what it was they needed to commit to. And then afterwards, I'll just read what they wrote. They said, Pete, after our session last month where we focused on making commitments, you helped me realize I actually don't have a commitment problem. I have a quitting problem. I don't know when to end certain commitments, relationships, deals. This is why I'm hesitant to take on anything new. They went on to say, you stopped doing certain programs before, made radical changes in what you do and how you do it over the years. How did you know when it was time? So again, I want to make it clear for me, there's nothing more important than keeping a commitment, but there's also nothing more important than ending a commitment that's no longer serving you or the other people involved. It's a both and.
Yeah.
So that's why I really want to kind of talk about this, because so my response back to this individual, and then I kind of created an exercise for my other clients because I thought, wow, this could be helpful to a lot of people, is there are really 4 things that help me decide when I need to commit to something, like double down on it, and when I need to quit it. Okay. I want to walk through those 4 things, all right? So the first one is something we've talked about on this podcast before. It's one of my favorite exercises to do with clients on a regular basis, and it's called an energy audit. And I do an energy audit, some form of it, almost every month. And the entire focus for me is to free up more energy for time for fun, time for family, time for new business initiatives that I may want to pursue. So when it comes to, I have a much more in-depth energy audit than this, but here's 3 questions to ask yourself when it comes to auditing your energy when you're trying to decide whether to commit or quit. The first one is this. Again, these are the ones you want to write down. What people, activities, commitments, thoughts, and habits are draining me of energy? And if you want to jump in on any of these, feel free. The second question is this: what people, activities, commitments, thoughts, and habits are energizing me? So you make a list of both, all right? Well, what are the thoughts, habits, activities, people, commitments, whatever, that are draining me? What are the ones that are giving me energy? And that takes you to this third question, which is take one single thing that's draining you and look at every single way you can remove that from your life. Or can you turn that thing that's a drainer into something that's an energizer? Okay. Often you can't. And it really, truly just needs to be deleted from your life.
Right.
And so that's what an energy audit is. And that's, again, not the only thing you need to consider when you're considering whether to commit or quit, but that's the first thing I would do.
Yeah. And sometimes when you quit something, like some of these drainers, you're like, well, then that adds an expense, or then that adds this. We've talked about it before, even in your business. Like, there's been some stuff you're like, I need an assistant. Like, I just can't handle some of these logistics anymore. And then the conversation comes up, well, it's an expense. In that case, the expense probably is more like you'd rather have the expense. Like, that's still less of a drainer. Like, you kind of almost have to. I think every time I think of like, well, what can I remove, or what is there I can quit without adding something else. But usually that thing that you add, if it really is a drainer, the thing that you can add to eliminate that is still more life-giving.
Yes. And you bring up a great point, because with all of these, what you're doing is testing. You're probably not making permanent life-changing choices. Just because you delete something doesn't mean that you add it. That's why I do the energy audit on a regular basis. I try to do it monthly, because what I might discover a couple months later, using your scenario, is that the financial pressure that was created by hiring somebody to do those things is a greater drainer to me. And in that case, I would want to say, okay, it wasn't worth it. Or maybe I look at it and I'm like, no, it's not draining me at all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's you're experimenting with these things.
It doesn't have to be a 100% out of your life forever.
Yep. The second thing that I look into after energy audit is what I call tolerations. So I'm trying to ask myself on a regular basis, Pete, what are you tolerating? This is probably the most common question I ask my clients on a regular basis. What are you tolerating in your life right now? And we've talked about this question on this pod. I hate this question. It points to these tiny little energy sucks in your life and in your business, and it's often people related. And it's just uncomfortable to look at on a regular basis. What in my life am I just tolerating? But here's the question you want to ask. What people, what activities, what commitments are you currently just tolerating? Then here's the second follow-up question to ask yourself, and that's this. What were you once committed to, but if you didn't need to apologize or feel embarrassed, and if no one was hurt by your actions, you'd love to stop immediately?
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have examples like flooding through my brain.
Well, give us one of something you feel like you're tolerating right now.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think as a mom...
Don't say pepper.
No. I think as a mom, there's lots of things like you feel like you're tolerating. Like it's not like your best day, you know? But I think of it honestly, and this is awful, and I love my friends dearly, but I've had friendships in the past that I feel like would ask so much of me and ask like, hey, will you take my yoga class? Hey, can you do this? Hey, can you come over and do this with me? And like over time, it just was taking from me.
Yeah.
And it was like a tolerating. It wasn't draining me in the time, you know, so I wouldn't put that in the category of drain, but it really was just this like, it was a transaction that I was getting nothing back from. So it did eventually probably drain me. But yeah, I think friendships sometimes, and not my good friends, like I have a core group of girls that I just absolutely love, but there are those kind of outliers that somehow take more from you than your actual friends that you want to give it to. So I think that's me, and just kind of in a relationship bubble, it can be friends that you don't even realize are actually taking like, I don't want to do another, you know, like book club, or I don't want to things like that.
Yeah. And I think the pushback a lot of people would say is, yeah, I'm tolerating this, but it's not really hurting me and I have the time. Here's the problem. Tolerations end up turning into resentments. And once they turn into resentments, it'll you know, drain you, and it will drain them as well. Yeah, that's so true. That's when it turns toxic.
Yeah. Do you have anything you're tolerating?
Oh, tons of things. Yeah, tons of things. Gosh, I'm trying to think of one right now.
You can actually publicly share.
I've really tried to weed out a lot of the tolerations in my life.
Yeah. That's good. Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You can't think of one. All right.
Okay. I tolerate some of the things I eat. I'm just tolerating.
That's so true. Our dinners lately have just gone like just boring.
Yeah.
We do the same like 5 to 10 things every 2 weeks.
Do. We need help with that.
Thanks. Somehow that came back on me.
No. We share that.
No, I know we do. Okay. Anyway.
Okay. So you've got the tolerations. You have the energy audit. The third thing I go to, which is the most non-scientific of all of them, is a gut check. I want to do a gut check, especially before. This would be if you're on the fence about whether to commit to something or just completely ignore it, is to do a gut check before you make any important decision. I can't tell you the number of times I made a decision and only weeks later, you know, it turns kind of south and I'm like, I had a feeling about that, but I didn't trust that feeling and I gave into it anyway. So like, obviously something that's clouded my judgment, and I didn't trust my gut in that moment. Something just got in the way, and I convinced myself this was a good idea or that I was the right person to do this, only to find out after I committed, no. So if you can do the gut check before, be really honest with yourself. I think a lot of us talk ourselves into certain commitments. We paint these perfect scenarios. It's only going to take a couple hours, and it ends up taking 20 hours. You know, you've got to regularly look for those red flags, those signs, those clues that maybe this is a poor decision, or even after you've made a decision, being willing to admit yourself, I made a poor decision there. I thought this was going to turn out different than it was. And then getting out of those commitments as quickly as you can with integrity.
Yeah, that's good. I think as a parent, a lot of times you have gut checks when you're weighing work things versus family things.
Yep.
It's like in a moment you feel like this is right because somehow, you're like, well, I still have to, I've got to provide, I got to do these things. But then in some circumstances, there is that gut of like, I don't think that's worth it.
Yep.
You and I have had conversations of like, weekends you might have been gone and you would have had to miss like a football game or something. And it was one of those moments where it's like, your gut, you could in a moment convince yourself like,
sure,
because it's not a bad thing. Again, it's not like this is a glaringly X, don't do this kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like gut checks happen a lot as a parent where you're just like having to weigh what's more important.
Yep. Yeah. Again, pointing to that whole, it's an experiment, right? It's trying to figure all this out. Here's a couple questions that might help you if you're trying to lean into trusting your gut. Ask yourself this: what does your gut intuition tell you about this? Like, what's it really telling you in this moment? Now, what are the other voices around you saying? What does your gut tell you about this? Second one is, what tiny red flags are you not paying attention to? Again, because sometimes we really want to convince ourselves that's a good idea, we ignore some very obvious red flags.
Yeah.
So you got to stop and ask yourself, what are the red flags that I haven't even considered because I haven't wanted to? That I need to consider before I either commit or quit this. And then the third one is, what decisions were once great, but as uncomfortable as it might be to admit, are no longer a good decision.
Yeah. It's like putting your pride behind you.
Yes. Like in one season, whenever you committed to this, whether it was 6 weeks ago or 6 years ago, it was the right decision in that moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's still the right decision.
Yeah.
That's why you got to reevaluate this stuff constantly.
Yeah. That's why you do these energy audits with your clients it's more than once. You got to keep like kind of adjusting and looking at that. You know what I find challenging as you're talking about like the gut check? I have a hard time personally weighing the gut check versus fear. Like, is this my gut? Is this my like heart saying this is probably not a good call? Or is it fear?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really hard thing to kind of like differentiate in your soul and in your mind when you're going through things. Cause it's like, sometimes they hold hands.
Sure.
Like sometimes it's like gut tells me this is wrong. And I'm also scared of it.
Yep.
Or sometimes it's just straight up, I'm scared and it's the right thing. But it's hard to know deep down sometimes what that is.
Yeah.
Like trusting that.
Well, you've heard me say this 100 times. I think everybody needs a coach. And this is a perfect scenario why.
Yeah.
Because they can give you that neutral, objective, like, let's think about, and help you dissect. Is that your gut or is that fear? Because you're right. They can sound very similar.
Yeah.
So that's good. Okay. All right. Fourth area is burdens. So, my name is Pete Wilson, and I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Could finish that sentence for you.
I love helping people. I do. I love solving problems, and sometimes I pay a price for that. So my default, if I'm just left on my own, will always be to jump in and helping support people and saying yes to almost any request that comes across. But I think now in this season of my life, I know some deeper truths. And one of those truths is what got me to my current level of success was saying yes to almost every opportunity. But what will get me to the next level of success will probably be saying no to almost every opportunity.
Yeah. That's true. That's really hard to like wrap my brain around because you have to have the capacity to pursue whatever that is.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, then you're doing everything diluted.
Yeah. So listen, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're 23 years old, you just got out of college, say yes.
Yeah.
Say yes to everything. Say yes until you can't say yes anymore.
Yeah.
Till you're out of balance or whatever. But then as you age, as you mature, as you get certain levels of experience and skill sets, you have to understand that what got you to that place, saying yes, is also what is going to keep you stuck.
Yeah. I would also say, because, talking to a 23-year-old versus like, let's just say you're 50, you also might be stuck. Like you might be in a rut too. And I also think that's a time for yes. Like, unless you have like a forged path you're going towards. But like, I know in my life, whenever I've felt like just stuck or bored or like empty of passion, the things that got me filled up again were starting to do new things and say yes to new things and trying to kind of figure that out. So I feel like you can have that say yes moment even midlife if you're weighing both
For sure.
of them.
Yeah. And usually has to do with starting something new. Whenever you're starting something new, you're going to have to say yes to a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
It's how you get traction. It's how you get
Yeah.
momentum. It's how you get connections. At some point, though,
When you've hit the ceiling.
that strategy no longer works.
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to understanding that every time you say yes immediately to something, there is an invisible but massive cost. And you have to weigh that cost. And my experience with leaders and entrepreneurs and CEOs that I work with is they are over obligated and they are under committed. And they have a huge list of things that they once said yes to that has shifted from a commitment to a burden, which just makes sense. The longer you do anything in life, you're over time going to be over obligated and under committed. You're going to have said yes to a bunch of things that are no longer relevant. And if you don't do the hard work of figuring out which things aren't actually helping you advance, move the ball forward, then you're going to get bogged down and you're not going to have room for that next yes. What was that book that Lisa Turkhurst?
The Best Yes.
The Best Yes. That was a good book.
Yeah, we talked about that a few weeks ago on the podcast.
Did we?
It's essentially like her point in this book is your best yes is the most important thing you can do. So essentially your best yes is also your best no. Like you have to learn how to create boundaries in your life so that you kind of have a framework to kind of go off of. Like, is this worth, is this, weekly breakfast worth not seeing my kids off to school?
Yep.
Is, all those things. And sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. But she kind of, walks through kind of that best yes, which after that book, I feel like for a long time in my brain, I would ask that question kind of because it gave you like a language. Is this my best yes? And it's a really kind of, that to me is where your gut comes in a lot of times.
Yeah, yeah. She also talked about in that book, if I remember correctly, how to give gracious no's.
Yes,
which
she
was
did.
helpful for those of us that are wired as people pleasers. And I actually put this in my notes. Maybe I got this from that book, but that these following words, especially for those of you that are people pleasers that need to say no to a commitment, these are invaluable. Thank you for the invitation, but I'm a gracious no at this time.
Yeah.
And then no further explanation needed.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, thank you. I am honored that you would ask, but I'm going to have to give a gracious no here.
Yeah. I actually don't mind when I ask someone to do something, them saying no. I'm also a people pleaser. And I think because I'm a people pleaser, I also appreciate when someone says no, because I'm like, that was hard for them.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not hard for them, but it's like, I can almost trust that their yes is true as well.
That's right.
So it's an interesting dichotomy there.
Yep. So here's a couple questions to ask yourself in this area. First one is this: is it time in my life to make no my default response? So if the person right now, you're cruising along and yes is your default response, but that's gotten you into a lot of stress and a lot of mess, could you flip that and make no the default response? Like your initial response is, no, I'm probably not going to do that. Now I'll evaluate it. And then the second question is this: what was once a commitment but is now a burden? What's something you once committed to? Again, it was a good commitment at that time, but it's become a burden for you, and it's burning you out.
Okay.
All right. And then I thought this was interesting. There's one other question that this client asked, and the question was this: when you quit something, do you feel guilty for abandoning people who may have counted on you? Because for most of us, there are certain commitments you can make that really just involve you, but maybe you actually made that commitment for other people, right?
Yeah.
You wanted to get in shape for your wife or your kids or whatever. But a lot of times we're in these situations where if I quit this, it could impact some of the people around me. Could impact their job. It could impact, whatever.
That's hard.
And so my response to that is this: when I have a choice between guilt or obligation, I'm going to take guilt every time.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's wise?
Yeah, because obligation means you're still enduring whatever that drainer is.
And I rather feel guilty about saying no to someone than to have a sense of obligation or feel that they're a burden.
And I feel like that would go away eventually. And not, you know, we're not saying like be heartless and say no to everybody, but I'm like these really important no's, I feel like will start to not feel that way anymore because it's starting to give you life, and you can replace that guilt with like energy and focus and presence and all of that. Yeah.
Well, and to go back to what you just said a minute ago, we were talking about like, you don't mind when you ask somebody to do something and they say no. And what I love about that is, so in that moment, they may and probably do feel a little bit of guilt for telling you no. But they also kept you from becoming a burden in their life. And so now they can still treat you in whatever way they did before the request you made. But if they had said yes and obligated themselves to that, even though they didn't really want to, they now have you in the category of a burden. And nobody wants to be a burden. That's why you're okay when they say no.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because it kind of frees you a little bit from being captive of like, because you know those like dinners you go to and you're like, they don't want to be here. You know, or like you ask someone to come to your exercise class that you're leading and you're like, that girl has not worked out in 10 years and hates me right now. Like there's so much of that like you internalize and you can't even enjoy it. So I totally think that. Flip side of that, if you feel like there's someone who is burdened by your expectation of them, like what a gift to be like, hey, just so you know, like you don't have to keep doing this. Like we can take a break. I think that's such a good thing too. I remember it was like a book club kind of. No one really probably read the book. But at the end she was like, guys, we don't have to keep doing this. And everyone was like, great. Because I have like all these things I probably need to be doing other than this. But yeah, it's kind of like giving that excuse for them. Anyway.
So I hope that was helpful. Go back and listen to it, write those questions down, and spend some time thinking about, do I need to commit this, double down on it, keep going, or do I need to quit it? And again, going back to that whole principle that what got you where you are today is not what's going to get you to that next level.
I think that's so important.
So you're going to have to free up some space, create some margins in your life. And the only way to do that is to quit some things.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Super helpful. Go back and write those down, work through that, spend some time on that. I think that's a really fun thing to do. And you can even do that with your spouse, like as a family.
Yeah.
Like if there's family stuff you're doing, like what are we committing to that we don't need to be committing to? And just kind of working through that. I think that'd be really cool.
Very.
All right. Thank you guys. We'll be back next week. Thank you as always for listening. Share. Let us know if you guys have topics you'd like us to talk about. Obviously we are always open to hear that.
How do they do that? Where do they email us?
Well, you can email us, but probably social media is the easiest.
Okay. I'm sorry.
You're fine. We did have an email. Well, we do. I'm not even going to share it because I don't check it enough.
I'm still living back in 2001, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry.
Social media if you want. We do have an email, but it's long and I don't really feel like checking it as often as I would have to. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week. And that was another
Good talk.